Welcome back to Why? Learning Japanese History, Episode 5. Here's a question that sounds simple but cuts right to the heart of how power actually works. Why was Himiko able to become queen? We're in the late 2nd and early 3rd century. Japan, known then as the Land of Wa, is engulfed in civil war. Male kings are failing. Rival clan lords cannot agree on who should rule. Violence is endemic, and into this situation steps a woman who holds no army, who is described in ancient Chinese records as a shaman, someone who communicates with spirits and practices what the records call kido, meaning sorcery or magic arts. She never appears in public. She is served almost exclusively by female attendants. And she rules, stably, for decades. How? The answer is one of the most elegant examples of political engineering in all of Japanese history. This is Episode 5, The Himiko Algorithm, Reverse Engineering 3rd Century Power Dynamics. Let's start with the historical situation, and the paradox at its center. On the left side of this slide, the Great Civil War of Wa. The Chinese historical record known as the Weijindan, a section of the Weiji, the Chronicles of the Kingdom of Wei, described Japan in the late 2nd century as a chaotic era of continuous warfare. Rival kingdoms across the archipelago were fighting for supremacy. Male kings attempted to unify the archipelago through force. They failed. The more they fought, the more the conflict spread and deepened. This is a common historical trap. When every claimant to power uses the same tool, military force, no one can decisively win, because winning requires admitting defeat, and every side believes force can still prevail. The result is prolonged, devastating stalemate. On the right side of this slide, the enthronement of Himiko. The solution that the clans of Wa arrived at was, by any measure, extraordinary. They chose a female shaman, someone who derived her authority not from military command, but from claimed communication with supernatural forces. She was described as using kido, a term combining the characters for demon, or spirit, and the way, or path. In modern terms, we might say she was a spiritual medium, a ritual specialist, someone whose authority came from a different domain entirely than military force. The paradox on this slide asks the question directly: why did a woman without military power rise to the top in an era of bloodshed? The answer is precisely because she had no military power. But to understand why that mattered, we need the causal chain. Here is the causal chain, the structural backbone of this entire episode. Step 1. Political division, the turmoil of war in the late 2nd century. As we've established, male military kings had failed to unify the archipelago. The society was stuck in a deadlock of force. Step 2. Religious authority, kido, shamanistic rule. The clans of Wa made a deliberate choice. If military force cannot resolve the conflict because everyone can use it, then the answer is a source of authority that cannot be challenged by military force. That source is religious, specifically, the claim to divine communication. Himiko's kido was not superstition in a naive sense. It was a political technology. An authority that transcends human military hierarchy cannot be defeated by human military means. You cannot fight a queen who speaks for the gods. Step 3. External acknowledgement, tribute to Wei in 239 AD. Even religious authority has limits within a closed system, where skeptics can simply choose not to believe. Himiko's masterstroke was to add a second layer of legitimacy, formal recognition from the most powerful empire in East Asia. In 239 AD, she sent envoys to the court of the Kingdom of Wei, one of the three kingdoms competing to reunify China after the fall of the Han dynasty. Wei recognized her as the Queen of Wa friendly to Wei, and sent back a golden seal and 100 bronze mirrors. Step 4. Establishment of legitimacy, stability of Queen Himiko's rule. The combination of religious authority and external recognition created a form of legitimacy that no rival clan could easily challenge. The result was decades of stable rule. At the bottom of the slide, the episode's structural theme, 3 methods for creating authority's legitimacy. Mystery through religion, external acknowledgement, personal charisma. Himiko used all 3. That is the algorithm. Now let's apply the 3 perspective, why, framework to understand the deeper logic of Himiko's rise. The arrow at the top of this slide shows the paradigm shift, from rule by force, the model of the male king, to rule by mysticism, the model of the female queen. This is not simply a change in personnel. It is a change in the fundamental theory of where legitimate power comes from. Perspective 1. Whose interests? For the powerful clans of the small states that made up Wa, the problem with a military king was simple. Every clan with a strong army could theoretically challenge him. Choosing any one military lord as supreme ruler immediately made every other military lord a rival. The solution was a leader who occupied a fundamentally different category, a neutral authority that no one could complain about. Himiko, as a shaman queen, was above the military competition. She didn't threaten anyone's army because her power wasn't military. She was a product of political compromise, chosen precisely because she was acceptable to all sides in a way that no warrior king could be. Think of it as a constitutional monarch in a parliamentary democracy. The value of the crown is precisely that it is above the partisan fray. Himiko's Kido was her version of that transcendent position. Perspective 2. What changed? The paradigm shift from violence to authority represents a transformation of legitimation principle. Before Himiko, legitimacy was demonstrated through military victory. The strong rule because they have proven their strength. After Himiko, legitimacy was demonstrated through sacred connection. The queen rules because she speaks for forces greater than any army. This is not a minor adjustment, it is a rewrite of the foundational logic of political power in the region. Perspective 3. Why that timing? The decisive factor was the failure of the existing model. Male kings, ruling by force, had created a prolonged deadlock. It was precisely because the old system had collapsed that a new principle could take its place. This is the insight the slide labels, crisis births new leadership. The worse the crisis becomes under the old model, the more receptive people are to a radically different alternative. Himiko was not possible in a stable, well-functioning system of warrior kings. She was only possible, only thinkable, when that system had demonstrably failed. Now let's examine the third element of Himiko's algorithm more closely, the tribute mission to Wei in 239 AD. This was not a simple diplomatic courtesy call. It was a carefully calculated use of what we might call East Asian gravity, the way that the political legitimacy of the dominant Chinese empire radiated outward to neighboring states. The context on the slide is crucial. During the Three Kingdoms period, China itself was divided. Wei, Shu Han, and Wu were competing for reunification. In this situation, Wei needed to incorporate surrounding countries into its diplomatic network, not just to extend its reach, but to demonstrate its own legitimacy as the rightful heir to the Han dynasty. The more peripheral states that recognized Wei, the stronger Wei's claim to being the center of the East Asian world order. This created a mutually beneficial opportunity. Himiko dispatched envoys from Wa to the Wei court. Wei recognized her with a formal title, ruler of Wa, friendly to Wei, and sent back material symbols of recognition, a gold seal and, remarkably, 100 bronze mirrors. Why 100 bronze mirrors? Because bronze mirrors in this period were the most prestigious prestige goods in East Asia, objects associated with the sun, with divination, with sacred authority. They were not merely gifts. They were distributed by Himiko to allied clan chiefs as proof of her special connection to the Chinese court. Each mirror said, "My authority comes from beyond Japan, from the greatest empire in the known world." This is a textbook example of what political scientists call borrowed legitimacy, the strategy of reinforcing domestic authority by securing recognition from a powerful external source. Himiko understood, with remarkable clarity, that domestic legitimacy and international recognition could reinforce each other. Her authority within Wa was strengthened precisely because an external power of unquestioned prestige had validated it. This slide organizes the exam-critical content around Himiko into a framework. The central circle, crisis leads to religion, religion leads to external liaison leads to stability, is the structural argument we've been building. Now let's connect it to the specific exam vocabulary you need to know. S rank, the Wajindan and the gold seal of the King of Wa. The Wajindan is the section of the Chinese chronicle Wei Ji that describes Japan and Himiko. It is one of the most important primary sources for early Japanese history precisely because Japan had no written records of its own at this period. Everything we know about Himiko comes from Chinese documentation. The gold seal and bronze mirrors received in 239 AD are both exam-critical artifacts. Understand what they represent, not decoration, but the formal acknowledgement by way of Himiko's political legitimacy. S rank, Himiko's role, the unseen queen, strategy. The Wajindan records that Himiko never appeared in public, was attended mainly by women, and communicated through a single male intermediary. This is not coincidence or personal preference. It is a deliberate political strategy. Visibility creates vulnerability. A ruler who can be seen can be evaluated, compared, and potentially found wanting. A ruler who is never seen takes on an aura of sacred mystery. The unseen queen strategy was Himiko's way of protecting and amplifying her religious authority. She ruled not despite being hidden, but partly because of it. A rank, the Yamataikoku location debate. One of the most enduring controversies in Japanese historical scholarship is the question of where exactly the kingdom of Yamatai was located. The Kinai theory places it in the region around modern Nara and Osaka, consistent with the later emergence of the Yamato polity in that area. The Kyushu theory places it in northern Kyushu, consistent with geographic proximity to the Korean peninsula and the Wei court, and with some archaeological evidence. There is no definitive resolution. For exam purposes, know both theories, the evidence for each, and why the debate remains open. B rank, Himiko and Toyo. After Himiko's death, our male king was installed, and civil war immediately broke out again. The instability ended only when a 13-year-old girl named Toyo took the throne. This episode is exam important because it proves that Himiko's model was reproducible. The structural need for a female religious ruler was not unique to Himiko personally. It was a systemic response to systemic conditions. Now let's extract the universal pattern from Himiko's story. The formula at the top of this slide is the key. Political chaos right-pointing arrow integration by religious charisma right-pointing arrow incorporating external authority right-pointing arrow stabilization of rule. This is not a formula unique to 3rd century Japan. It is a recurring structure in world history, and the comparison table on this slide makes that visible. Case 1, 3rd century Japan, Himiko. Internal crisis, the Civil War of Wa. Authority used, Kido, shamanism. External recognition, Wei, the Chinese Empire. We've analyzed this in detail. Case 2, 7th century Japan, Prince Shotoku. Internal crisis, political conflict with the Soga clan, competing claims over court authority. Authority used, Buddhism, a new universal religion that transcended clan affiliations and provided a framework for centralized imperial authority. External recognition, the authority and cultural prestige of the Sui and Tang dynasties of China. The result was the same structural outcome. Religious charisma plus external validation stabilized a chaotic political situation. Case 3, 10th century Europe, the Holy Roman Empire. Internal crisis, the fragmentation of German princes after the dissolution of the Carolingian Empire, with no single authority capable of commanding universal loyalty. Authority used, Christianity, specifically, the claim to be the legitimate defender of Christendom. External recognition, coronation by the Roman Pope, the undisputed head of the Western Church. Otto I's papal coronation in 962 AD is structurally identical to Himiko's tribute mission to Wei, securing external religious validation to stabilize domestic rule. Case 4 to 21 Stone Century Modern States. Internal crisis, domestic instability, civil war, contested elections. Authority used, democracy, human rights ideology, nationalist ideology. External recognition, United Nations Security Council resolutions, IMF recognition and conditionality, international diplomatic recognition. The formula is identical across 4 cases, across 18 centuries, across 4 continents. Political chaos creates an opening for a new kind of legitimacy. That legitimacy is consolidated through a combination of internal ideological authority and external recognition from a prestigious outside power. Himiko was not extraordinary because she was unique. She was extraordinary because she was the earliest clear example we have of a universal political algorithm. Before we close, 3 prompts to try with an AI to deepen your understanding. Each targets a different dimension of today's material. Prompt 1, structural comparison. Name 3 examples from world history where political integration was achieved through religious authority like Himiko, and explain their common structure. We've given you the framework, now try to apply it yourself. The goal is not to reproduce the table from the slide, but to construct your own analysis of the underlying mechanism. Prompt 2, modern connection. What are the apparatuses of legitimization used in place of religious authority in modern states? Compare with Himiko's structure. Think about what fills the role of Kido in contemporary politics. Democracy, nationalism, international institutions, legal systems. The comparison forces you to identify what is structurally similar and what is genuinely different between ancient and modern legitimacy. Prompt 3, exam preparation, summarize the grounds for both the Kinai and Kyushu theories regarding the Yamataikoku location controversy in a table, and explain the points that can be used in descriptive questions. This is direct exam practice. A well-organized table that shows you understand both sides of the debate, with specific evidence for each, is the foundation of a top-scoring descriptive answer on this topic. All three prompts work best if you first try to answer them yourself before checking with an AI. The gap between what you think you know and what you can actually explain is where real learning happens. Let's close with the three structural keywords that define this episode. First, theocracy, the unification of religion and politics. Himiko's rule is Japan's earliest clear example of theocracy, a system in which political authority is derived from and justified by religious authority. This is the oldest pattern for creating legitimacy in human history, and it worked. The reason it worked is that religious authority, unlike military authority, cannot be directly contested by force. You can defeat an army. You cannot defeat a queen who claims to speak for the gods without also challenging the gods themselves. Second, external recognition, the strategy of stabilizing domestic rule by borrowing the authority of powerful nations. Himiko's tribute mission to Wei is the template. She understood that her domestic authority was strengthened, not weakened, by acknowledging the greater power of Wei. This is counterintuitive but historically robust. Leaders who can credibly claim the support of the world's great powers gain domestic legitimacy that no purely internal claim can match. Third, crisis and charisma, the principle that the collapse of existing authority gives birth to an entirely new type of leader. Himiko was only possible because the old system had failed. Every historical crisis that destroys an established order simultaneously opens space for a leader with an entirely different kind of authority. Understanding this dynamic is one of the most practically useful insights that historical study offers. Theocracy, external recognition, crisis and charisma, these are not just the keys to Himiko. They are a toolkit for reading political history across any era and any culture.